On Halloween night, I, Jake White, along with my friends, Paul Burns, John Riley, and Mark Thompson, were just hanging out, doing the usual Halloween stuff, drinking beers and telling scary stories. My friend Paul is this guy, you know, the kind of guy who's always up for anything, like literally anything. He's got this wild streak in him, always looking for some kind of thrill or adventure. Well, Paul brought up the story of the old Phillips house in the woods. It's supposed to be haunted, apparently. It was where a serial killer named John Michael Phillips, nicknamed the Slasher, lived in the 90s. His place was a real house of horrors. They say lots of young kids kept going missing every Halloween, never to return home. Eventually, Phillips was caught and sentenced to the gas chamber. Sadly, the police discovered the remains of his victims buried beneath his basement. A dark history the town will never forget. Paul said to me, "Hey Jake, since it's Halloween, I dare you to spend 10 minutes in the haunted basement of the old Phillips house. It's all dilapidated and creepy now. Perfect place to see a ghost on Halloween night." We all had a few beers and I decided, what the hell, let's do it. So I walked up to the house. There was a sense of unease about it, with the wind rustling in the background. I looked back at my mates who were laughing and encouraging me to keep going. When I got to the front door, it swung open. Nervously, I stepped inside. It suddenly slammed shut behind me. Was that the wind or a ghost? I was unsure. I could still hear the guys laughing outside. I felt like I was on an episode of Most Haunted. This place gave me the heebie-jeebies. As I walked toward the basement door, it creaked open. I started feeling really scared and called out to my friends, but there was no answer. The house was eerily quiet, except for the wind and the creaking floorboards. I began hearing subtle sounds of laughter coming from the basement. I walked ahead, and the door locked behind me. Thinking my mates snuck in, obviously trying to prank me for a TikTok video, I shouted, "Guys, stop messing around! I want to get out of here, let me out!" But there was no response. I turned on my torch, and despite knowing that in most horror movies, you're not meant to ever go near the basement, I thought maybe there was a way out down the stairs. Suddenly, as I entered the room, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head before falling to the floor and blacking out. 30 minutes went by. My mates started to get worried and decided to follow me into the house. They called for me but got no response. They split up. Paul went around the front of the old building while John and Mark wanted to stay together and went around to the back, looking for a way in. Paul broke in through the front boarded-up windows of the house as the door that was once previously opened was now locked shut. Paul was seriously freaked out, calling my name, but there was no sign of me. He heard a sound coming from the old, filthy bathroom. There was a dirty, broken mirror on the wall, next to which was a large hole leading into another room of the house. He heard whining from within. As he put his ear up to the hole to investigate, suddenly, an arm with a knife burst out, stabbing Paul in the side of his head, and he fell to the ground, lifeless. John and Mark were at the back of the house, trying to get inside, but everything was boarded up except for the top-floor bedroom window, which was slightly ajar. Mark said, "I'd say if you give me a lift, I can reach that first-floor bedroom window." John agreed and lifted Mark up as he climbed through the window and followed through to the first-floor landing. He came to the top of a large staircase. Looking down, he suddenly felt a sensation of being pushed with brute force and tumbled down, breaking his neck. John was pacing up and down the back garden, worried sick, calling out, but no one was answering. He tried to use his phone, but there was no signal. Suddenly, he heard a voice shouting for help coming from the basement. He ran as fast as he could to the front of the house. The front door was again somehow open. He continued into the house, trembling as he descended the stairs leading into the basement. The room was empty, dark, and ghostly. Shaking, he said, "Guys, okay, the joke's over. You got me. I want to get out of here." As he turned around, out of nowhere, a large knife emerged from the darkness and plunged into his chest. A shadowy figure appeared from the darkness in front of John, holding the knife in his chest as John fell to his knees. In shock and on the verge of passing out, he said in pain, "Why, Jake? I don't understand. You're supposed to be our friend." I responded, "My real name is Jake Phillips, the nephew of John Michael Phillips, aka the Slasher. Your family's condemned my uncle to death, and now I will have vengeance on his behalf. See it as a family tradition." I smirked. John stared in shock and fear, took his last breath, then collapsed to the floor. I pulled the knife from his corpse, wiped it clean, walked out the door, and said, "Halloween is my new favorite time of year."